What's up? Not much.
Splitter 60.
Yeah, they speak a lot of browser.
I invited the ops one who's involved, and they're going to invite that separately.
You'll see it's in. So coffee.
This isn't, and even in middle school, well, I can't hear it through here because this is what's actually doing. Do it again. Yes. Yeah. Oh, wait.
Good?
I think so.
Really like a joke.
Holding the pointer. Trying to hide this? Google Hangout. Virtually together.
12:32.
What's that?
We're going to get started in just about another minute or two. We're just getting the live feed up for the YouTube viewers at home. So just give us another moment. I have it. I have it.
It's randomly flipping between the two characters. Isn't there some like automatic thing that you? Now it's just him too. Oh, there we go. Nope. Mm-mm. It's still flipping. No. Technology! No, it stopped. It's still just Cam 2 though. It's still Cam 2.
Oh, you can select whatever camera. Okay, we'll just go with it. If it doesn't work, then.
Okay.
We'll go with it. It's the first one. Bear with us.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to see this large crowd for our first weather briefing of the semester. And Rich Grumm, who has been so grateful to always participate in these weather briefings, has decided to kick us off yet again this semester for fall 2014. And Rich, in case you don't know him, he's at the National Weather Service just down the way in Innovation Park. He is the Science Operations Officer there at the office, and he works with our department, so you'll be seeing around a lot. if you're new to us, you'll be seeing him quite frequently giving briefings and also helping us out. But Rich, thanks for coming today, and you should notice it's been rather nice outside, so Rich will give us the details of the forecast.
Handheld mic. I feel like singing. I didn't expect a big crowd. It's a free lunch. Well, I want to talk a little bit about philosophy of long-range weather forecasting. I personally like to use ensembles in a kind of a blended approach. But I do believe there are some applications where it's good to have a good rule of thumb, actually. I'll talk a little bit about our relatively dry and cool weather pre-anemic front came through last night. We had a 0.01 over there. So they had the station here? A lot of people want to know. Is it even asking? I don't think that's a really big issue for most. The fun stuff is in the Western United States, coming out of Mexico. The only thing really of interest, I think, to most people. Maybe my biggest question is where kites or explosives that were kites on my bike rides. The key players in the coming 3 to 10 days is the moisture in the southwest comes east. This persistent rebuilding ridge in the west, the pesky warm sea surface temperatures in the North Pacific, which kind of feed into the seasonal forecast because 'tis the season to make long-range forecasts. But of course, whenever you read a long-range forecast, I like to remember that prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. And Mark Twain once said, "Never trust a forecast made in September, and be careful about those made in January, December, February, November, May, October, June, August, and for that matter, July." I actually came across this quote in a book about risk aversion and assessing risk. It was kind of a funny quote. It's actually from a novel he wrote. I didn't know that. So looking at our local weather here real fast, if you look up here, this is kind of like the temperature trend for us over the next coming few days, like low to mid 60s today, a little bit warmer maybe tomorrow. A couple of implied chilly nights. That the cyan line is the freezing mark. There's a couple of outlier members that say we could have some really chilly weather. But actually, right around the time of this weekend, we see a brief warm-up, if you believe this. And then, but you can see initially all the ensemble members are really close together. Then we get right around here on the 19th, we begin to see the spread. Now here we see a lot of spread, and then we think of our friend Niels Bohr. So anyway, and then you see the same thing if we look at the 700 temperatures, a little bit more consistent, but usually sometime around the 21st of September, there's a lot of uncertainty in the forecast. And the gold line, the thick gold line is actually the median, and the black line is the mean. So the good thing is the mean and the median are relatively close most of the time. And as for precipitation, this is probably the critical day for most people. So you can see from the 17th to about the 21st, the atmosphere is almost as dry as my sense of humor. But then we get all this chaotic potential for rain later on in the week, but there's really nothing you can sink your teeth into. There's no clearly the screaming message is a relatively cool, relatively dry pattern, and I guess we're done. So, but well, and not really. So here's the long-range pattern. I use the NCEP 6Z GEFS. It has the traditional spaghetti plots on top, and you see when you initialize things, it's pretty much no spread. You can see there's some introduced perturbations, a little bit of spread, and then the lower panel, this is the 500 pattern. This is the ensemble mean for the 0-hour forecast, and then I like to show the anomalies. And if you have a big anomaly, usually A there's either a signal, or B that there's not a lot of spread in the members. Otherwise, you wouldn't get a big anomaly. And you can see this kind of persistent ridge that's been out here. There's a trough coming underneath it. There's that tropical system whose name I can't pronounce. I think it's the cat from Garfield, Odie. Well, and then there's another tropical system out here. But we're protected by this trough. And then this is what the forecast looks like next Wednesday, and you can see in the mean there's kind of a hint of the same trough ridge pattern. There's a bit of anomaly, so we probably have some relative confidence in the ridge in the western U.S. and western North America, and maybe a deep trough actually out here in the Gulf of Alaska, and then a big, weak nebulous ridge out over the Atlantic, which probably will protect us from any tropical activity. So that's how the forecast is supposed to evolve. And if we go a little longer, and I'll come back to the link here. I think I already had the link fired up. This is the NACE is a combination of the combination of the NCEP, GEFS, and the Canadian ensemble, and this is how it kind of starts out. I have to go 6 hours into the forecast period, and this is 500, and then this is 850. You can see it's relatively cool. We all know that when we got up this morning, and the last couple of days have been kind of cool. But you can see the pocket of cold air, and as we move forward in time into October 1st, you can see there's still a hint of an implied ridge on the west coast, and as a print of the a hint of the subtropical ridge just across the south. And there's no really cold air, if you will, in North America, but there's no really super warm air. All the warm air is out over the ocean. So not a really exciting pattern for us, I think, weather-wise. And so this is the sea surface temperatures over the Pacific. And you can see that really, as you get towards North America, there's a huge pocket. And this map doesn't go far enough up, but there's a huge pocket of really warm water out here. And you can see we have this general El Nino look to the Pacific Basin itself. But this big pocket of warm water up in the Northeast Pacific has kind of been dominating the weather pattern now, I guess, on the order of, 12, 13 months. And I guess Cliff Mass did a blog about it. He called it the blob. They didn't know how to get rid of the blob. But I saw the movie in the 60s, You Kill It with CO2. It's like, but the blob is what they blamed. You got to be old to get that joke, right? So, but anyway, the blob of really warm water up here is what people believe is now helping maintain these ridges. Of course, in the discussion they claim that a lot of cyclones actually helped get it there. But anyway, so that's what the sea surface temperatures look like up there. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We'll come back to this if I remember. So Firefox. So anyway, here's the satellite imagery over the area today. You can see, the cold front came through. It was pretty weak. What's left of it is going off the east coast. The frontal boundary's way out here. A lot of just instability Q. There was some hint of the cold air coming across the lakes. Got a little bit of a lake effect hint to it, but it's still kind of early in the year. But it's kind of today's kind of what you see, what you get. We got rid of the low clouds this morning, and then we get self-destruct Q, and we'll have it all day. When I was driving over here, you could tell we have a real nice unstable stratification. There was some clouds getting pretty vertical, and then they were topping off, looked like they were thunderstorm wannabes, but they were really kind of flat at the top. But a lot of instability out there behind the front. Kind of a autumn day for a late summer, but nothing really great going on in our area. So if we go to the U.S. scale, it looks a little bit more exciting if we focus in on the southwest. And this is all visual, isn't it? I had to go back. I think this looks okay. You go to the USIR, and it's gonna. I have to hit the loop, right? You can see our tropical storm that wreaking havoc in the Bajan is coming. It's coming up the coast here. The moisture plume's we'll see is gonna come and curve into here. And so we're expecting at least a legitimately good rainfall event in the southwestern United States. And you can envision the really nice flow on this side of the storm. It's gonna pull some good moisture up into portions of New Mexico and Arizona. So that'll probably be like the real interest for most people. So. You can see the cold front that came through here. It's pretty quiet. Very good low clouds. Other frontal band coming through up here. Nothing really exciting for us. So we'll zoom in on the forecast, and I'll start out with the regional forecast for us. This is from the RAP. I don't know about everybody in the room, but I find it really difficult to transition to transition from using these really nice high-resolution models that give these really nice depictions of what the weather may look like as it evolves, and then how do you transition to using our coarser resolution models and our ensemble forecasters? I think that in that 8 to 18-hour forecast range, there's a disconnect sometimes when you see the fine details in the rainfall in a 3 or 4 kilometer or the synthetic radar versus the probability of precipitation and like the SREF or the models. I think that's an issue. Maybe I'm too old, but I can't get my head around how to transition between them. Anybody run into that problem and see that issue? So, but anyway, here's what this forecast briefly looks like for us, and you can see everything just moves off and very, very quiet. As you can see that front over the north of the lakes and going towards New England just kind of weakens. So we're in a really quiet pattern. If you look at the sea level pressure from this guidance, you can see that nice northwest flow and a big gentle high coming. I'm pointing with the microphone. Coming over the. I need a third hand. I knew that. So you can see the flow around this big high coming at us. So nothing really exciting for us. If I go to the ensemble, the 12Z data is still not in, but that's okay. And I go to the U.S. scale, because the U.S. scale is probably more exciting for us. And I think the F11 is full screen, right? As opposed to F111, which was a Navy fighter bomber, right? So Anyway, you can see the important feature here is this huge plume of above normal. There's actually 2 shades of red in here, like forced deviation above normal precipitable water anomalies coming up ahead of that storm. You can see the pocket with the storm and then the band that's coming up. And when you see big precipitable water anomalies coming up into Arizona, you know it's going to get wet. And so we'll just step through this if this thing stays in full screen mode. And you see we actually we peak at about 6 sigma above normal precipitable water anomalies. It's really boring here. You know, we're really dry, so it's not really worth. We know that. So maybe some frost issues this week is probably the excitement here. So you can see this big plume of moisture, and it peaks out with a huge portion of southern Arizona getting 3 to 4 standard deviation above normal precipitable water value. So you know it's going to get really wet there. And I guess the Weather Channel, they have Jim Cantore there with a cool-looking cowboy hat on. So they're getting excited about that. And then this moisture plume eventually tries to come east, as does a pretty big surge of moisture from the Pacific itself. So this blob of moisture, if you do trajectories, you'll see this kind of moisture coming in out of the southwest into the central United States. So the rainfall is going to probably spread in, to the east, but it's going to struggle to get here. This is by Saturday. There's a hint of the moisture plume coming out back over the ridge. So we're kind of protected if you believe this pattern. I mean, this is 12Z Saturday morning. It's got the traditional, cold air damming setup. So it actually it's probably not going to rain Saturday, but we could be cold air dammed. And, once you get underneath the inversion, it could take all day to get any low clouds. If we get any low clouds and fog, it might not be a pretty day. It just might not be a wet day. But this is not exactly the best conditions for us if you lived here long enough to know, we're going to probably have an inversion. But obviously we're going to hear about weather in the southwest United States. So, and then that moisture just falls apart before it ever really gets here. So pretty dry for us. And if I switch to the probability of precipitation, we'll pick a nice interval, like something that ½ inch is way too unexciting, right? So let's go by about an inch of precip. And we step forward, you can see the bullseye of precipitation. All the models are hammering this area here to have a nice bullseye, 100% chance basically of over an inch of rain in a 24-hour period coming up. And then they move that into Arizona. You can see the high probability of rain, and this is over an inch of rain, which is significant for people in Arizona. And this blob of precip just slowly tries to work its way out into New Mexico. Obviously, the strong southerly flow pulls out some moisture into Texas, and then this thing works its way and weakens as it gets into the plains. But my guess is it's a long-range forecast that there's a lot of uncertainty with that track. But clearly, it's going to be wet in the southwest. Anybody plan to go to Mexico the next 2 days? So we go to 2 inches. You can see there's a few members have 2 inches, and there's actually a very narrow. It was at the Gulf of California. It's going to rain a lot. I don't know if there's whales in there, but you can see there's a probability of over 2 inches of rain that comes out across Arizona, New Mexico. Pretty high probability of 2 inches of rain through Thursday. So the big issue forecast-wise, of course, is going to be the rain in the southwest. There's just nothing exciting to talk about here, I don't think so. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about the weather here, but any more than we have. But let me see if I can escape out of here. F11 again. And I'll go back. Anybody have any thing they want to add or contribute before I move on?
So you mentioned the warm-up for the weekend, or at least the tempered warm-up. Do you see a return of the eastern ridge, or is it just...
The western ridge?
Well, it's going to be sort of an eastern ridge into this next system coming through. Do you see a return of that little warm bubble?
Oh, I can go back and... Let me go back. We can go to the eastern United States. We'll go back to... We can look at the surface for all intents and purposes. And we got to go F11. Well, the high probability forecast has a big anomalous anticyclone going by us. This is a classic cold air damming scenario for us. That's above. The models are consistent forecasting a big anticyclone on Friday that slowly weakens away. So we're going to have a low-level surface ridge, but that you could almost imagine how in the world of low-level temperatures in theta E, we're going to have this frontal boundary stuck in here like it's been happening all September. So the warm-up might be aloft. If you have a lawn chair at 850, it'd be pretty warm. But we're going to be cold air dammed, I think. This is a classic cold air damming scenario. I guess anybody who's been here a long time probably knows it. Not until the front goes by will we get the drier air and warmer air, and it'll be short-lived if I switch to 850 temperatures. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I don't think we're going to get really super-duper warm here until probably the front comes through. This model implies that maybe Sunday, Monday we might get some warmer, but then another cold front comes through. we're not going to get any big ridge. I think the big ridge, I think on the ridge at 500 is going to be out to our west. Anybody else before I switch screens? Any other? Yes?
The tropical systems like Odile and the previous storm were both impacted Baja California Southwest. Some of the models had it coming a little further north. How good are the forecasts for, like, let's say, a storm actually trying to come into San Diego versus being realistic?
Well,
is there any history of storms, not just in precipitation, maybe, but getting anywhere close?
I'm not a tropical expert, but there have been tropical storms that have made it there before, but they're usually pretty weak.
I think the last time one actually made it to San Diego as a tropical cyclone of some ilk was, I think, 1953. So, yeah, pretty rare. And yeah, these, I mean, at least the NHC forecasts are killing these ones off again before they make it, which is pretty typical.
Anybody else? F11 first, right? Then I can escape. Next time you're in a prison, remember it's F11, then you can escape. So anyway, we're back to the sea surface temperature. You can see the sea surface temperatures are really kind of warm up through this area. There's some cold pockets that have generated probably due to the tropical storm mixing a little bit. So if we move forward in time, you know, why the ridge in the west, I kind of answered that, but this is the seasonal forecast now for the next 3 months of the sea surface temperature from the climate forecast system. You can see the really warm water pushing up into the coast of Mexico and California, and this persistent pocket of warm water in the northeast Pacific. There's actually a lot of warm water off the east coast of the United States too. These are anomalies, but you can see it's kind of our somewhat traditional classic El Nino pattern, except I don't know when it's been when we've had an El Nino pattern with a lot of warm water wedged up against North America. I don't know, that's a little flying new ointment. Now these are the Nino 3-4 temperatures, how they've been, if you will, and where they're forecast to go. And I guess this is just kind of a normal El Nino still being forecast. I'm not an El Nino expert, but I guess these, when I see numbers above 2, I get excited. But most of these are just kind of right around 1, so we're about a standard deviation above normal in the Nino 3-4. And so you can see that we've been kind of persistent in a very weak warm episode, almost neutral, but we're forecast to go a little bit stronger in a warm episode. So, and this just shows the depth and the warm pocket, kind of the wave moving across the Pacific. This is September, and then the forecast. So basically, the warm water moving across the Pacific below the surface is basically saying we're going to probably maintain this El Nino. So that's the classic signal for the winter, which everybody's been talking about. So again, this brings out people who are making forecasts, and they're coming out ubiquitously now. But the El Nino will clearly bring about the snow crust. People who like snow like El Ninos. And the warm water in the northeast Pacific will probably fuel this. So with the ridge expectations, people think, well, you have a chance to get cold air and an El Nino pattern with an enhanced East Coast storm track. So I would expect a lot more predictions about snow and cold for the winter of 2014 and 15. These will change, no doubt, and the snow or lack of snow in Siberia in October will dictate other forecasts. But you know what they say about forecasts and predictions made in October. So my forecast is colder weather is generally coming over the next several months. Should begin to see it bottom out around January and probably getting warmer by March. So I just swapped out the months here. Probably.
Rich, could you go back to the current sea surface temperatures? I just want to point out that the next slide, which is
the forecast, the seasonal.
Is that the forecast?
Yeah, it's the fifth.
Okay. You used the term classic El Nino.
Yeah.
In reality, El Nino's
yeah.
sea surface temperature fingerprint is very close to the equator.
Yes, it's a little bit further north.
I would, ignore all that warm water that is well north of the equator, because that's not really the classic El Nino. If you want to look at El Nino, focus on the equator.
Yeah.
And there it's sort of, well, maybe it's a little bit above average, but it's not.
Yeah, I think they're forecasting kind of a weak El Nino. Is that the official?
Yeah, and the El Nino forecasts have become increasingly
and this
less
has been,
El Nino-like with time.
Yeah, they were much stronger earlier in the year.
Go back 3 months.
Yeah, they were
there
twos.
Was high confidence of an El Nino for the winter, and now they're backing off on it.
Yeah. This is the latest forecast of the temperatures in here.
And that anomaly has to be above, I think, 0.5 for 3 consecutive months for it to officially be considered an El Nino.
And the forecast now is about 1 for the
If that verifies.
If it verifies.
Go official roundabout.
And there were earlier forecasts that were 2. Remember back in the, everybody was excited about the super El Nino. So, good point. So, and then, in summary, we have the pattern's relatively dry for us. We have cool periods, and we're currently protected from the Atlantic tropics. El Nino is supposedly coming, and the warm SSTs in the North Pacific will probably bring out the snow crows. I guess we'll have some long-range forecasts here about in October, right? Is that the? I'm sure.
Someone will give it.
Any questions or comments?
Students, anybody questions? It can be something simple. It doesn't have to be about the forecast necessarily. If you have questions about its anomaly plots, are a little bit different than what you're used to.
I have a question about El Nino. If we have a weak El Nino, I know the forecast was for a stronger one, but if we have a weak El Nino, what does that typically correlate to here? Is there any indication, or is it, if it's weak, is it less clear what may happen here? Anyone know?
I'm not an El Nino expert. Experience.
Teleconnections with weak El Ninos are, they're not very strong.
Right.
Even with moderate to strong El Ninos, teleconnections here are not as strong as they are, for example, in Florida, which tends to be very rainy during moderate to strong El Ninos.
The only positive for El Nino typically is there's been papers over the years about East Coast winter storms, and we tend to get more storms coming up the coast in El Nino years. In La Nina years, there's a dearth of storms up the coast. So the potential for storms along the coast is probably higher than other winters, I guess you'd say. But whether it'll be snow or rain, it's anybody's guess.
I have one thing. So, we're talking about the big ridge in the west. We're talking about the big ridge in the west, but could we get in the same problem we did last March where we get way too much dry air coming in thanks to the northwest flow and the direct discharge from Canada and really get kind of skunked out of any type of snowfall just because the storm track gets shunted so far east? I mean,
I'm not a good seasonal. I plead
Yeah.
for.
I could see that happening again.
Anybody else? Well, thanks for your time.
Next week, we currently have an opening for the briefings. One of, I think, 3 openings left. So faculty, staff, anyone brave willing to give a briefing, I'd be happy to talk to you afterward. Cleaning up. But next week, 12:30, there will be someone.
Could be you.
Could be me. Thanks, Rich. But yeah, March. I think March was the month that we didn't get squat. So we got a trace, and that was it.
We're cold and dry.
Yeah, I'm almost certain that was the month we had 0 for a trace for snow the entire month. Yeah. So yeah.